Welcome back, my friends. We're going to make some stuff here in the house again. We're going to do a little something for dinner. We're going to make our really quick and easy, well, not so quick, but very easy pulled pork recipe that we're going to use throughout the week. So come along, we'll show you how to do it. Now, one of our frequent commenters here on the channel, Terry McKinney, one of our subscribers, asked about tamales on our chili powder, homemade chili powder recipe video that we did, and kind of sparked my interest. I haven't made them in quite some time, but I make my tamales out of pulled pork. So we're going to make this pulled pork and we're going to use it throughout the week for different dishes. We can have pulled pork sandwiches, we'll have tacos. But I want to make tamales too because I haven't made those in a long time. And I thought I'd bring you along for the ride for that too. But that'll be another video after this one. But I'll show you how we do our pulled pork. It's super simple. You can do it inside your house. You don't have to do it out on the smoker. And it's really good, really versatile dish that you can use. So we have one of our big pork shoulders. If you've been following the channel, you saw us process this from butchering the hog that we did out here on the farm. So we're going to use our first big pork shoulder for this. So I'm going to use our Dutch oven. We're going to heat this up. I'm going to put just a little bit of oil in the pan to get things started. And we're going to take our pork shoulder out and we're going to brown it on all the sides, get a real nice color on it. We're going to season it up real good. And then we're going to put our Dutch oven in the oven to let it cook. Probably 3 or 4 hours before it falls apart. So let's get this thing going. Got our roast going. We've got our pot on high. We heated our pot. Then we put our oil in. We heated our oil. Then we put our pork shoulder in there. We want a good sear all the way around this thing. That's why we got it on high. We started out with about a 1/4 cup of good vegetable oil. And that oil in there is not going to hurt anything because this is a leaner piece of meat. We didn't leave a lot of fat cap on it, so that little bit of extra oil is not going to hurt, and it'll provide a little bit of moisture once this pulled pork is done. You can see the browning happening here in the pan. Yeah, it sounds like a lot going on, and there is, but that's all right. That's why we got this nice deep heavy bottom pot that we're cooking it in. Now I haven't seasoned this because I don't want to burn the seasoning down in the bottom of that pan and cause a lot of issues. So once this gets good and brown and we get ready to put it in the oven, we're going to add a whole bunch of seasoning to it. We're going to use our normal seasoning that we always use. This is fantastic on any meat, and it's going to add a really good flavor to your pulled pork. Now some people will use a sugar-based seasoning for pulled pork, but I don't do that early on because the sugar will cause it to caramelize and burn really quickly, especially during this process. So I always hold off, and if I need a sweeter dish, like say we do a pulled pork sandwich, I'll just add some sweeter barbecue sauce or something like that to it instead of adding sugar on the front end where we would cause some burning issues. Now if you don't have a big heavy Dutch oven and you got maybe just like a roaster pan or something like that, you can do this browning under the broiler in the oven as well and get a real nice color on the outside of it before you cover it. Another good reason to use a tall-sided pan is when you're browning your edges. It helps you keep the roast on edge and doesn't fall back over into the pan. Got a good crust all the way around our pork shoulder here. So we're going to start seasoning it up. Going to put a good amount. This is a very large piece of meat, so pretty much everything that will stick to the outside of that. And then we're going to flip it around and do this on all sides. Then put on a real tight fitting lid. Make sure your lid fits tight because you don't want any moisture to escape. If your lid doesn't fit real tight, maybe put a piece of aluminum foil and then put your lid on to keep it nice and tight, because that's the key to making fall apart good pulled pork. We've got our pork shoulder seasoned up, and as this thing cooks, it's going to release the moisture from the meat, and that's going to develop a nice broth down inside of there. And because we're cooking at 275 degrees, our oven is preheated at 275. That's above the boiling temperature, which is 212 degrees of water, which will cause this to kind of boil and steam inside the pot, which will allow it to pull really easily after a few hours. And you want to lock that moisture in there, kind of like a low pressure cooker actually. So we'll put the lid in, we'll get this thing in the oven. Now if you wanted more of the smoke flavor on your pulled pork, you could brown it all the way out on the barbecue. You wouldn't have to flip it around so much. You just close the lid, and then once it looks really good, you got a nice crust on the outside, then you would bring it in and put it in the Dutch oven and move on from there. It's the same thing as wrapping it and leaving it on the barbecue, but you're not wasting briquettes or wood chips or anything like that, because once it's closed up, you're not going to get any more smoke out of that, the briquettes and stuff that you're burning, because it can't get through the foil. So you're almost better off just bringing it in the house anyway, even if you're cooking it on the barbecue. You can get smoke in other ways too. If you're just cooking all indoors like we are today and you want the smoke flavor, you can use liquid smoke. And this isn't some chemical that's made in a laboratory. This is actual hickory smoke mixed with spring water. They have a way of making it, so it's all natural. You would mix 2 teaspoons of this per pound into your meat like before you put it in the oven, and it'll give it a little smoky flavor, just like you would have cooked it on the grill. Now if you don't have a big Dutch oven or anything like this, just use a roaster pan or any kind of pan. Just make sure that your pan has a really good lip on it like this, so you can tuck that foil under there real tight and make a real tight seal. If you use like a regular cake pan, there's nothing really to seal on, so some of your moisture is going to escape. Now after you put your foil on the pan, obviously this pan, you'd want to remove your broiler top on it. But after you get the foil on your pan, go around your pan with your thumb or your finger, and the inside of the foil, you want to wrap it over to where when the moisture builds up on that foil and runs down the side, you don't want your moisture coming out over here into your oven. You want it to go right back down into the pan. That's why you want to push the foil down below the surface, outside surface of the pan all the way around. And then again, make sure it's tucked in really good underneath the side. Now if you're not familiar with a pork shoulder, it might be called something different in your area. It can be called a Boston butt or a butt roast, something like that. It comes from the front shoulder of the pig. It would be like your chuck roast in a beef up in the front shoulder. Those roasts are really good. They got a lot of fat content in them, but you want to cook them low and slow to get them to tenderize, because if you cook them fast like a chuck steak or something like that, they're not the most tender piece of meat on the animal. And that's, I think, why in the beef they called it a chuck roast, because they used to chuck it into the grinder and grind it for hamburger till people figured out you can cook them slow. Now I've seen this done with beef. We used to do deep pit beef in this same fashion. It's pretty much the same thing. The meat's just kind of steaming in its own juices. But in a deep pit, you've got it wrapped in a lot of foil containing all the juices and everything with the spices, and they put onions and garlic and all that, and they put it down in that deep pit in the ground, and then they seal that off. Many of you wanted an update on our sprouting, and keep an eye on it. These are our broccoli sprouts here. I'm trying not to do all that. You see how they're filling the jar up? We're not quite done yet. We probably got a day or two more on these, and these will be done. The jar will be full. Looking really good. Here's our mung bean sprouts. You don't want to stand up. There's our mung bean sprouts. You can see they're starting to sprout. They're not quite as fast. These were started the same day as our broccoli sprouts. And then we started some new ones this morning. Well, actually, last night I soaked them last night. We have radish sprouts and we have alfalfa sprouts. You can see some of the radishes are already starting to sprout. I don't think the alfalfa is, maybe, not sure. But that's how our sprouting is going. I'm thinking the radish sprouts will have maybe kind of a peppery kind of flavor like a radish would, and I'm going to try those on tacos. And we got the pulled pork coming up and everything, so we'll be making some like street tacos. So maybe we can try those radish sprouts and see how they would be on a taco. I think it might be fantastic. Now it's all over but the waiting now. This roast is going to take about 3.5 to 4 hours to cook in the oven. So whatever your supper time is, if there's no more prep that you need to do, you need to start about 4 hours before supper. And this stuff will pretty much be done. So at 3.5 hours in, we've checked our pulled pork and it's just fallen apart beautifully. So we're going to take it out of the oven. So we're going to go through here once this cools off a little bit, and we're going to remove some of the fat that has not rendered, because when you bite into pulled pork, you don't want to bite into a big hunk of fat. And there should be, I believe, a bone in here somewhere. This might be the boneless side of it. But if there was a bone in here, it would just pull right out clean. But you can see there's plenty of liquid down in here. So all that liquid is going to be mixed back into the pulled pork once we pull it. So we'll come back when this is cooled a little bit. Our pulled pork has cooled down enough to where we can handle it now. I've got it on the dish. I poured all of the liquid out of the pot, and we're going to separate that fat from the juice, or most of it. So we got our pulled pork here. What I'm going to do now is put some gloves on, and we're going to go through our pulled pork and pull out all the big, crazy, fatty chunks. And I haven't done anything to this. I haven't pulled it or anything, and it just falls apart, just taking it out of the pot. But I'll show you some big fatty pieces once we get through here. So far, we've just hit meat. So there's some fat right there that we want to pull off. The rest of that is meat. But that right there is a pretty good hunk of fat. You wouldn't want to bite into that when you're eating your pulled pork. And if I was leave this in here, if Kelly came across that, she'd be done. She'd put her plate down and go, nope, I can't eat this. So if you've ever gone to like barbecue restaurants and stuff like that, a lot of people don't even worry about pulling that fat out. But it's a lot better when they do. And they really should do that. Who wants to eat a big old chunk of fat? Now, if it's crispy pork fat on the outside of a barbecued pork chop, I'll eat that, because you can't get much better than that. But there's a little bit there, but not a whole lot. It's all meat. I've already tasted this. It just tastes phenomenal. Whenever I make this, Kelly and I will walk by the pot of pulled pork while it's sitting here on the stove, and every time you walk by, you pull a piece out and eat it. It tastes so good. Perfect consistency. You can see there's still a lot of moisture in it. And I just kind of pull it apart as I go through it. Little piece of fat there. Ruby and Brandy's going to love that stuff. We'll share that with them. See how that just pulls right apart? Let me try to find a hunk of fat here for you. Here's a little bit here. Anything that would really be off-putting when you eat it, that's what we're pulling out of here. So we're going to have some nice pulled pork sandwiches tonight with this. Kelly's going to pick up some like Hawaiian rolls. That works really well for these, like sweet Hawaiian rolls. But you can use any rolls really. You can use sliced white bread if you want. And some people will put barbecue sauce in it. I love the flavor just like this and could eat it all day long just with this flavor profile it has now with our favorite seasoning on here. There's a big hunk we want to pull off there. Fat's kind of intertwined with the meat, just like on a chuck roast. A lot of the fat has rendered out, as you saw in that little cup there that we had all the juice in. Now when we skim that fat off of that juice, we don't throw that away. And the reason we're not going to throw that away is, like I said before, we're going to make tamales. And the fat in that juice is the secret to good tamales. Most of your masa recipes will call for a lard or shortening or some type of fat. By using this fat that rendered out of this meat, your tamales will just absolutely be off the hook. And that's the way the Mexican ladies do it. The true authentic cooks that make their tamales. That's the fat they use, is the fat that cooks off of the meat. And that's why those tamales are so crazy good, because of that fat. Man, that's just gorgeous. All right, we'll come back when we have all this done, and we'll show you what it looks like. All right, we've got all of our pork separated out. We have the fat and the juice left in the plate. We're going to add that to our measuring cup over here so as not to waste it. And then we'll pour that fat off. So there's that little bit of fatty stuff that we pulled out of the meat. Got a big old pot of pulled pork over there. It just tastes amazing. So now let's pour this fat off, and I'll show you how to do that. So you see now that it has set and mellowed out, the fat floats to the top of the liquid. So we have a little coffee cup here that we're going to use because it's easy to scoop the fat out of it, because this fat at room temperature is going to turn hard. So we're just going to pour this fat out until we reach the line of the liquid. Just pouring the fat off the top. And we want to stop before we get to our good juice. And we're about right there. You can leave just a little bit of fat on the top. It doesn't hurt nothing. And then that's going to go, our juice, right back into our pulled pork. And that pulled pork will soak up all that fantastic juice. So looking in our pot, you see how all that pork is soaking up that juice. You just kind of roll it around in there a little bit. It re-moistens all that meat. And then as this cools, you want to just keep kind of turning it, and it'll soak up all that juice. And then you just pull out what you need for whatever meal you're going to make. Throw it in the microwave for a minute or stir it up in a little saucepan, and you have a fantastic meal. You have about a cup of rendered fat in there. Look how flavorful that looks. That's going to make some really good tamales when we get to that recipe. Now from here, you can do whatever you want with this pulled pork. Like I said, tonight we're going to have pulled pork sandwiches. Mine is just going to be with that meat right there. I'm not going to put anything on it. If you got a little coleslaw or anything like that, put a little coleslaw on top of your meat when you put it on your bread. Fantastic. I'll just put a little bit of our zucchini relish in. It'll knock my socks off. I know that already. But like when we make the tamales, we'll put a little more Mexican flavor in that meat. We'll use some chili powder. I'll actually make a little bit of our enchilada sauce to stir into the meat before we make the tamales. But you can go any way you want with this. You can put barbecue sauce in it or put barbecue sauce on your sandwich when you eat it if you like a sweeter, more saucy pulled pork. But sky's the limit. So I hope you try this. It's fantastic. I'm going to be picking out of that pot tonight. I'm not going to be able to stay away from it. So till next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Stay tuned for our tamale video, and we may make some tacos or something like that and show you what else to do with this pulled pork. So love you guys. See you next time.